Hi, this is Ren,
This is Casey.
and this is All Walks of Film. But today we're not talking about film, we're talking about GamerGate. And we talked about GamerGate before, but I thought we'd talk about it again since we got a lot of feedback.
We did, and also when we've discussed Gamergate before, we haven't actually discussed Gamergate. We've discussed anti-Gamergate, which is a very separate movement from Gamergate. So now we're actually talking about Gamergate.
Right, and one thing that I'm going to do, at least for this first part, is to try to discuss Gamergate without talking about feminism, without talking about harassment of women, and to really get at some of the issues that I think could help games progress.
So you want to not talk about anti-Gamergate and talk about Gamergate.
Exactly. Before we get into talking about Gamergate, I will say that from the anti-Gamergate side, they want to push the narrative. They want to talk about this victim mentality. Oh, it's about harassment of women. It's not fucking about harassment of women. And that's exactly why I feel compelled to do this.
Right, that's why you have so many YouTubers who say, oh, you're talking about Gamergate, well, when are you going to talk about ethics in video games journalism? And I know a lot of people who are either not a part of Gamergate or who are actively a part of anti-Gamergate are just like, ugh, the word ethics, it's so gatory. And by the way, I'm not exaggerating, I've heard that. You know, people are so sick of hearing the word ethics, which is why it's important to keep saying over and over again, Gamergate is about ethics in video games journalism. That's why people hold on to it so insistently, is because it's important to keep saying it until that actually becomes part of what people know it to be about.
Well, and to be honest, it's not just about ethics in video game journalism. It's about ethics in journalism, period.
Woohoo!
And a lot of Gamergate stuff has actually fed into criticizing op-eds like Gawker, BuzzFeed.
I know Kotaku, Polygon, Gawker, BuzzFeed, and I believe also IGN have all updated their ethical policies directly because of the hashtag Gamergate.
Right. IGN isn't as bad.
IGN isn't as bad, but let me just say this. They did a review of Nightcrawler and spent the entire review calling the main character Leo multiple times.
Well, and to be fair, IGN isn't... even though they cover movies and TV, it's mostly video games.
I know, but like they couldn't fact check the name of the protagonist in the movie. His name is Lou.
Right,
His name is Lou.
And that's a problem with a lot of people covering stuff like Gamergate, is they hit onto the juicy stuff. Anita Sarkeesian is in the media, so they go to that. But we're not going to talk about Anita Sarkeesian. We're not going to talk about Zoe Quinn. We're not going to talk about Brianna Wu. You can look that shit up. It's easy.
Right.
We'll talk about that later.
I'm not going to add anything to that because you're right. Let's not talk about that. That's the point. I think it's actually really important to actively not talk about them because, like
every time you talk about them, it gives them power.
True. Every time you talk about them, it does give them power because they get so much, all press coverage is good press coverage. But the other thing is like I said, anti-Gamergate is not really related to Gamergate.
Right. And I will say that we have criticized Anita Sarkeesian, but we try to be very clear in how we criticize her. We criticize her as a media critic,
which is her job.
And not too much in the relation of Gamergate. I know in the first podcast we did mention her a lot.
Right, that was when Gamergate was still really young, though, at least, and it was something very new to us, and that was when we actually hadn't heard a lot about what Gamergate actually was. We mostly heard anti-Gamergate,
right,
and that's when I became more against anti-Gamergate than for Gamergate.
Right, and I will say that a lot of negative things that Gamergate has to kind of struggle around is the fact that it did start with a rather embarrassing subject to talk about, which is somebody was sleeping around and did get good press coverage on that. And that seems to be the only thing that a lot of people talk about. And we really have to move past that.
Right, and people on the GamerGate side have sort of, hindsight being 2020, retroactively started explaining that situation that we actually can't name, and we cannot name one of the people involved in it. We actually can't. But people who know GamerGate know what we're talking about. Like, people in GamerGate as opposed to anti-GamerGate have started sort of rephrasing that situation as an editor named Nathan Grayson was guilty of ethical misconduct for sleeping with a game programmer, that he was involved in the development of that game, and then not promoting that game that he was part of the development in, but promoting the game developer multiple times in various other projects that he was a part of.
Right.
Which I think is a good thing, because that is the problem in that situation.
Well,
that the editor and the reporter was the person who was guilty of ethical misconduct. That's how it relates to journalism. So I think that's a good move to, better late than never, sort of reword the problem with that event.
Right, and anybody who's critical of something, if they become friends with somebody who makes a product, they're gonna have a bias too. When Roger Ebert became friends with Martin Scorsese, he did say at one point that there could be a bias towards a Martin Scorsese film because he did have a personal relationship with Martin Scorsese. Nothing sexual, but but
interesting fan fiction to the internet.
I'm sure it's out there. Rule 34.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, it just got created. But I do think that there needs to be a disclosure. If somebody has...
Well, now there's the Patreon disclosure. If a journalist has donated to the Patreon of anybody that they're covering, they have to disclose it up front at the top of
and
their
that's
article.
that's actually owed to GamerGate.
Exactly. That's one of those changes that was a direct result of GamerGate as a movement.
Right. And one of the things that we also have to clarify is, just like with Watergate, which is the term that was coined by actor Adam Baldwin.
Wait, Adam Baldwin coined the term GamerGate, not Watergate.
Right, but he coined it off of
Watergate.
And it was because there seemed to be this very seedy relationship between developers and people covering the games. And I'm sure if you've seen the hype for a game and then the game comes out and it's just kind of mediocre, that's kind of what this is. Like,
right, and we see this happen over and over and over again, and this is one of the only ways in which anti-GamerGate and GamerGate even correspond.
Well, and they both agree.
Well, here's the thing. This is one of the only ways that they correspond, is because most of this really incestuous journalism you're seeing is mostly for indie games. Steam games, greenlit games, very indie, not like major mainstream games. That's where you see a lot of this stuff coming from. And those are the games that a lot of the, shall we say, celebrities of anti-GamerGate are actually really invested in. Those are the games that they actually really, really like, and that they try to promote and get people to play them. Now, statistically, it's shown that their endorsements hasn't helped any of these games in general, but I think that's really the only way that the two are even connected anymore, is that they do both tend to talk about the indie game scene not more than the mainstream game scene, because both sides do talk a lot about mainstream gaming as well, but there's definitely an emphasis on the indie gaming scene.
There's an emphasis on the indie gaming scene, and I think it's partly because without some coverage, it's possible that those games wouldn't be as recognized, but as we see, it doesn't really do much to help those games.
Well, okay, this is getting into anti-GamerGate stuff. I'm sorry, but for example, when Anita Sarkeesian promotes games on Steam that she really likes, in general, it doesn't seem to actually affect the sales for better, which kind of makes it a draw. But on the other hand, one of the things that made this game developer who was at the forefront of GamerGate really in the spotlight was because she created a game and posted it as a greenlit game for Steam. And because it was a bad product, it didn't do well. And she played the gender card saying, people are discriminating against me because I'm a female game developer. And then out of the woodwork comes, oh, awards, all this accolade, we're going to praise your game, it's amazing. While consumers are just going, dude, what the fuck? This is garbage. Although not all consumers. I have met people who genuinely like it, and if you like it, that's fine. But is it really worth, all the prizes that it has listed on its website? You know what I mean? If you like it, that's fine. But is it a great game? No way.
Yeah. One of the things that really bothers me about some of the issues that feeds into this corrupt journalism is this idea of bribing people for good reviews. Mm-hmm. There was a game called Shadows of Mortar that came out.
Right.
Which, from all accounts, was a genuinely good game. But they told people that were covering their game that they could only get early access and all this kind of stuff if they gave positive reviews to the game. Which, red flags.
Right.
I'm sorry, you can't bribe people to say that something's good. But people will do it anyways, because obviously you want to get the good press. But there's moral integrity in doing these things. And I think more importantly than using the word ethics, it's moral integrity. Mm-hmm. To cover a game and review a game with the same kind of passion and vigor that reputable film critics have. I'm not talking about fucking Peter Travers and, Armand White and people that, give bullshit fucking reviews. I'm talking about real, genuine people that care about cinema. And the reason why I have to bring up cinema is obviously this is a film podcast. We talk about film, so...
But also, you believe that gaming is an art form. It is an artistic form of storytelling, not dissimilar to film. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be held up to the same criticism.
Right. It should be held up to the same criticism. And one of the things that I actually don't like that some of the people from GamerGate say is like, just leave it alone, leave our games alone. No. Here's the thing. If it's a work of art, it needs to be criticized. It needs to be scrutinized. Some of the people covering that don't necessarily have the qualifications. Well, maybe qualifications isn't the best term, but some of the people covering video games and talking about video games don't really understand how to really review something in a way that isn't just a hit piece or a marketing piece. That seems to be the only direction that video games go into. So Grand Theft Auto is too violent or it's too sexist or whatever. And then you got the other end where it's like, holy shit, check out this awesome game. Oh my god, play it, play it, play it. But like, what do those games even mean? Nobody wants to talk about it. Well, that's not true. There are some people that want to talk about it. There's a great review. I haven't seen anything like this, but somebody before or after, but there was a guy who reviewed The Last of Us and talked about it as an experience, and then he talked about Left Behind.
I remember, yeah.
It was amazing, and I really wish that more people would review games in kind of an experiential, but...
Yeah, and this person put the review on YouTube, but it is not by any means a Let's Play.
Right, and I really wish that more people would tackle that.
Mm-hmm. And also,
I don't have the means to do it myself. I don't have the time, and I don't have the money because this podcast does not make me money. It's just something I do with passion.
Right, and to do those sorts of reviews and to capture gameplay footage and all that stuff, you need new technology that you personally don't have.
Well, I need new technology. I need the permissions.
Right. But the other thing, too, is when it comes to an issue of GamerGate, it should not be acceptable ever for a professional reviewer to review a game that they can even admit, oh, I didn't finish playing. That should never be acceptable. That's not cool. You can't say like, oh, well, I saw 3/4 of this movie, but I hated it so much that I walked out of the theater. But let me tell you all the reasons why it's bad. That's not cool.
The only time I will accept that is if the game is fundamentally broken.
Right. Like, you can say something is so broken or dysfunctional that you couldn't finish it, but I really wish I could remember very specifically which article it was. I can't remember, but I'll find it later and we'll plug it in. It was the reviewer said this game was so terrible in terms of storytelling that I couldn't finish it. That's not cool. Even if you admit it, that doesn't make you more... I mean, it makes you a little bit more ethical, but that's... You shouldn't write a review, period, if you won't finish it. Like, if you just won't.
There is a type of person that reviews things with a negative mindset before they even get into it. In film terms, there's a critic named Armin White who will literally review things. He actually got banned from Rotten Tomatoes, which, yeah, that takes a lot of work to get banned from Rotten Tomatoes. But he got banned from Rotten Tomatoes because he would just automatically say the opposite opinion.
That actually brings me to a question I have for you. Is there a website similar to Rotten Tomatoes? Maybe it's not Rotten Tomatoes. Maybe it's Metacritic.
Yeah, Metacritic.
Is Metacritic the one where normal people can just post their reviews and that sort of leads into the overall numbers?
Yes, but there is actually a problem with Metacritic. And that problem is that there were game developers that were actually literally holding people's jobs on the line based on a Metacritic score.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Yeah, so, like, if their game didn't get at least a 90% or, like, an 80% or something like that on Metacritic, they would lose their jobs.
That's not cool.
Which also feeds into this whole marketing mentality where the reviews are skewed to actually keep people's jobs.
Right, which is a good cause.
It's a good cause, but you as the consumer are losing.
Right.
You know.
And isn't it all about getting the video games to the consumers? Really, at the end of the day, isn't it about getting a video game to a consumer and having them enjoy it as a product?
Yes.
That's the thing, is that it feels like video games journalism is losing sight of that last part. But it's not just like people getting their hands on it, it's that they enjoy it.
Right, but also I think one of the things that frustrates me and one of the things that GamerGate doesn't really talk about is I really want games to be explored as an art form. I really want that to be explored more. I know Roger Ebert said something that pissed me the fuck off and, you know, bless his soul, but he said video games will never be art.
When did he say this?
He did say this in about, it was like 2005 or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That recently? Ooh.
I don't remember the exact date. You put me on the spot. I can find the exact quote.
Well, I just meant like decade. Give me a decade.
Okay, it was either the 90s or 2000s.
Okay.
But, yeah, it wasn't the 80s. It was much later.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I think it was late 2000s. And Nostalgia Critic actually talked about it for a brief time. And I do believe it was at the same time that he said that.
What did he have to say?
He disagreed.
Good.
I mean, here's the thing. Like,
I would expect that from Doug Walker.
Video games can achieve higher art form. Now, they are art. Whether they are good art is up for people to determine. I mean, they're games that people recognize.
Movies, though. It's the exact same thing with movies, where people look at a Transformers film and are like, well, when shit like this exists, how can you call film art? It's just movies. It's just entertainment, you know? But then you can turn around and you can look at some, you know, pick off the top of your head a great film that you really love. Because right now I'm only thinking of the really ones that would be inappropriate for me to say. Let's put it like that.
2001.
2001, okay. So, you know, you've got a medium where you can put 2001 and Transformers next to each other. They're the same medium. Video games is not dissimilar to that.
Right. I mean, there are games like Shadow of the Colossus, and then there are games like Ride to Hell, or whatever. I didn't play it, so maybe I shouldn't use that as E.T. Yeah. There you go.
Wow. Super relevant. So relevant. You're
Super
about as
relevant.
relevant as Vice. And the reason why I say that is because Vice actually came out with an article this week about that game.
Here's the thing. I don't play games that are considered terrible because it's too much of an investment.
Right, like you can watch a bad movie for an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Right, video games take a lot of your time, which
Right.
is
and
one of the
a
reasons.
lot more of your money. It's more than like $7 to $12.
Right, I mean, especially since most video games now run you about $60.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless you're buying it on Steam.
Well, even some Steam games, like I know, what was it? Gone Home, when it first came out, I know it's not still this price, but when it first came out, it was $20. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money for that game.
Well,
and that's not to say anything about the quality of the game. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if a Final Fantasy game is $60 and it's over 140 hours of gameplay, the whole expansive world, all this graphics, you have all these fighting mechanics in it, and you have a storyline that has to go a certain way, and you have cutscenes, and you've hired voice actors, and that's a huge project. Gone Home, when it first came out, not anymore, but when it first came out, was a third of that price for much less of a third of that amount of game, if that makes sense. That's all I'm saying. Because Gone Home was a very short game. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Okay, I can think of a game that it was okay, but it wasn't great, and it got a lot of hype to the point where I will never pre-order a game, at least not a new IP, because of this. And it's unfortunate, but
I know what you're gonna say.
Watch Dogs.
Yep.
They lied, showing video footage that was not part of the game, that was running at a better frame rate. And granted, I was playing on the PS3, but I did see the PS4 footage. They did lower it. And they talked about how the game had so many new things and it was addressing so many issues. And it really just is Grand Theft Auto with the cell phone.
And here's my issue with that. You can totally sell Watch Dogs as Grand Theft Auto with a cell phone. You can sell that shit. You didn't need to create this whole fake persona for what it was.
Right, and they talked about how accurate it was to Chicago. They got one street right.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I was just sitting there watching you play it at one point. I was like, where the fuck are you?
Yeah.
How did you get from there to there? I couldn't understand it because I was like, I take that subway line. That's not what it's like.
I've walked these streets. Yeah, I mean, the closest a video game has actually gotten to a city and actually recognized for was a game called L.A. Noire.
Right.
Which actually took place in the 50s, so they can kind of get away with it. Having a game actually take place in real streets creates
well, going back to what you were
problem,
saying before,
I think, with some people.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of licensing problems too, and permissions and stuff. But going back to what you were saying, because I've heard this so much as being a big issue within GamerGate, is to pre-order or to not pre-order.
The problem is when you're pre-ordering, you're giving money to something that's not finished yet and something that you haven't played, which is kind of like pre-ordering for a movie as well. I get that you're really excited and you really want to get it, and I really hate this notion that they're giving you, oh, well, if you pre-order, you get this character in a download. And one of the things that made me really fucking mad one time was I was on the ship one time, so I couldn't actually pre-order a game. And I wanted to because there was a game called Batman Arkham City. Mm-hmm. And there was a pre-order where you could play as Robin. And
you actually like Robin.
Well, the design of this Robin was fucking awesome.
Right.
You know, it had the hood. It looked really awesome.
Mhm.
It was the first time I ever thought Robin looked awesome. But only if you pre-ordered from GameStop. Could you, or Best Buy. It was one of those. I think it was both.
Mhm.
But you could only get it if you pre-ordered the game. So if you buy the game afterwards, you couldn't even have access to it. Which
That's pretty bogus. Like, I get including options for free if you pre-order, or you can get the game later and maybe pay out a little bit extra if you want those, nicer options. But to just take them off the table altogether, A, it rips off the consumer, but B, it's like, wow, what a waste. You created all this, like, the game developers created all this nice shit that the consumer just, period, does not have access to.
And you're punishing the people that want to wait until a review comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Which, let's face it, you should wait until a review comes out and determine for yourself. They don't give demos anymore. In fact, they charge you for demos now. These beta games and like early plays that they have.
I would really have no idea, but I'm pretty sure that the most recent demo that's come out was for Splatoon. And that had a really weird demo because within a 24-hour period, they only had 3 2-hour time periods that you could play because they were kind of trying to appeal to people all over the world in different time zones. So really their idea was that a person in a time zone would play 2 hours and that would be the full demo, or somebody who really, really, really wanted more would just stay up for 24 hours straight and just play it a lot.
Right. So there are a lot of issues, and we intend on covering more issues. We really wanted to get away from the common narrative just to inform you, because there's a lot of info out there, and if you want it, we can give you it. We'll try to cover it more just to fill people in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to get the information. We talked with people that were part of GamerGate. We got better info than you can ever find from the news, because the news goes for the juiciest fucking stories. The juiciest fucking stories are about women being harassed, women developers not getting the right stuff. But here's the thing, GamerGate actually financed Fine Young Capitalists, which does actually encourage women developers. Like, it is a program set to help women who want to make video games. So that kind of narrative is any sort of anti-GamerGate narrative you hear, you're going to... I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong for thinking this, because the media has done a really good job at tricking you into thinking GamerGate's bad, because guess what? They don't cover both sides. They only cover the side that is talking negatively about GamerGate. It's a sexist movement. Well, if you read the news and you read all these op-eds and everything like that, you would believe that. And I'm not going to harp on you if you do believe that. Here's the thing. You need to do the research. But people don't want to do the research. People have attention spans now that last 10 seconds.
Well, the other thing, too,
click, 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 click. You're on the fucking internet. You have the attention span that is faster than a fucking fly.
Well, the other thing, too, is that part of the reason why anti-GamerGate has so much clout to it is because a lot of people who are watching are, not everybody, because I know people who are actively a part of anti-GamerGate who are gamers. But a lot of times people are like the people in anti-GamerGate where they're not gamers or they're not heavily involved in the gaming scene.
Like that button poetry thing that I saw where the woman...
Oh my god.
Where the woman was talking about like how Anita Sarkeesian and all that kind of stuff. And I know but here's the thing. She was talking about God of War, and she didn't even know what buttons
She doesn't know what buttons are on an Xbox controller, but also...
Well, no, it's a PS3 game.
A PS3 game, sorry.
Yeah,
not
it's
Xbox, PS3.
It's a PS3 game. She was talking about...
She was talking about NES controllers.
Yeah.
A, B, up, down. Yeah. Plus, the other thing...
Well, they have A, B on Xbox, so...
On Xbox, but not PlayStation.
Right.
But the other thing, too, was... Oh my god, it's so horrible. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and procreation, wants to have sex with you. That is fucking atrocious. That's so terrible and disrespectful to women everywhere. How dare you have a woman who enjoys sex? Boo!
Yeah. So
Why is that such a problem? Like, if it was Athena, that would be an issue. I totally get that. But even if it was Hera, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But Aphrodite is the most appropriate choice. And she is in control of that situation. She wants sex. She's asking for it. You don't have to take it, for one. But for two, she's a woman who wants sex, who is asking for it. What is wrong with that? There is zero wrong with that. She's enjoying it. It's consensual sex. It's not like you go and you rape Aphrodite in any way, shape, or form. There was nothing in that was unconsensual to either party.
Right.
There was nothing wrong with that scene or the gameplay mechanics within. And I actually have seen that scene, and I actually know what I'm talking about.
As far as I can remember, I mean, like, thinking about all the games that have even had rape, they're not a lot. There's fucking Custer's Revenge, and then there's Rapeplay, which is a Japanese game that you can't find.
And to be fair, Custer's Revenge was not a licensed game.
No, it was a fucking porno game for the Atari.
Right, like, that was a fan-made game that somebody, like, bullshit around and put into a store. Like, it was not a licensed game. It wasn't
a fan-made thing, but it was for the porn industry, so, like, it...
But, like, for example, you could play it on your NES, but Nintendo was not telling people that rape was okay or funny.
Right. So, let us know what you think. Email us at allwalksfilm@gmail.com. Put in the comments below. Let us know what we're missing, what you would like us to talk about, and what you think. What side are you on? What side do you think the narrative should be? And what do you think would be accomplished if either side won? And hopefully you're not on the side of, can we please stop talking about this? Let us know what you think. Comment below. allwalksofilm@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. We will read your responses if you give them.
And probably respond. Like, say, this person said this, and this is what we think of that.
Let us know whatever you want us to call you, because if you do not say, we will call you whatever name that you put on.
Like
whatever
your YouTube handle.
Yeah, we'll call you your YouTube handle unless you specifically tell us to call you something else. Or to not disclose your name. Thanks for listening.